Welcome to SC-300, Practice Exam 2, Hybrid and External Identity. You will work through 45 original identity and access administration questions using the Identity Access dossier. Read each scenario and every requirement. After the answer choices, you will hear, "Lock in your answer." Then you get exactly 3 seconds of silence. Pause if you need more time. The review gives the complete correct answer, a concise, mechanism-focused explanation, and an exam clue. Question 1 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso synchronizes users from Windows Server Active Directory. During a domain migration, Priya's Microsoft Entra user principal name changed, but her still valid X509 certificate retains the old SAN principal name. The issuing CA chain and internet reachable CRLs are configured. The CBA policy targets Priya, and sign-in reaches the certificate picker. The certificate's issuer and serial number are unique and available, but Microsoft Entra cannot identify Priya with a default mapping. What should the hybrid identity engineer configure? Option A. Store Priya's issuer and serial value in certificate user IDs and configure that attribute as the username binding. Option B. Upload a duplicate of the issuing CA to the certificate trust store and keep the default principal name mapping. Option C. Create an authentication binding rule that marks the certificate issuer as multi-factor authentication. Option D. Change the conditional access authentication strength requirement so that any certificate is accepted for Priya. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Store Priya's issuer and serial value in certificate user IDs and configure that attribute as the username binding. CBA first validates the certificate and then uses the tenant username binding to identify a unique user. The default SAN principal name to user principal name mapping no longer works after Priya's Cloud UPN changed. Issuer and serial number is a documented high-affinity mapping to certificate user IDs, so storing the exact issuer and serial value on Priya and configuring that username binding repairs the failing stage. CA Trust, Certificate Strength, and Conditional Access are already satisfied or occur at different stages. Exam clue. Trace CBA in order: Trust and Revocation, Username Binding, Authentication Strength, Conditional Access. If the certificate is offered but no user is found, repair the certificate to user binding rather than the CA store or MFA policy. Question 2 of 45. Select two answers. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing. A Microsoft 365 group contains employees and B2B guests from several partners. The group owner must review continued guest access every quarter. The review must exclude employees, and when a guest is denied, automatically remove only that guest's membership in this group. The guest must remain able to sign into the tenant and retain unrelated access. The reviewer and recurrence are already configured, and non-responses are set to no change. Which two settings should the administrator configure? Option A. Set the scope to everyone and limit it to inactive users on the tenant level. Option B. Set the denied guest action to block user from signing in for 30 days, then remove user from the tenant. Option C. Enable auto-apply results to resource and use remove user's membership from the resource for denied guests. Option D. Set the review scope to guest users only. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are C. Enable auto-apply results to resource and use remove user's membership from the resource for denied guests, and D. Set the review scope to guest users only. Guest users only constrains the review population to B2B guests in the selected group. Auto-apply makes a denied decision effective without a separate manual apply step. And remove users' membership from the resource limits remediation to the reviewed group. The block and delete alternative has a tenant-wide blast radius and contradicts the preserved sign-in requirement. Exam clue: separate the reviewed population, automatic execution of decisions, and remediation blast radius. A narrow resource review should not silently become tenant-wide identity cleanup. Question 3 of 45. Match each workload to one identity configuration. Each configuration is used once. Contoso requires credential-free workload identities. Each target service supports Microsoft Entra authentication, and the required target permissions will be granted separately. Match each workload requirement to the most appropriate identity configuration. Requirements. Requirement 1. A workload runs across several frequently recycled Azure compute resources. One pre-authorized identity and its permissions must persist independently of those resources. Requirement 2. A CI workflow hosted outside Azure presents a short-lived assertion from its platform. It must exchange that assertion for Microsoft Entra Access without storing a secret or certificate. Requirement 3. A workload runs on one Azure VM. Its identity must be usable only by that VM and must be deleted automatically when the VM is deleted. Target bank. Choice A. Create a user-assigned managed identity and add a federated identity credential that matches the external issuer, subject, and audience. Choice B. Enable a system-assigned managed identity on the Azure resource. Choice C. Create a user-assigned managed identity and attach it to the Azure resources. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to C. Create a user-assigned managed identity and attach it to the Azure resources. Requirement 2 maps to A. Create a user-assigned managed identity and add a federated identity credential that matches the external issuer, subject, and audience. Requirement 3 maps to B. Enable a system-assigned managed identity on the Azure resource. Managed identity selection follows lifecycle and token origin. System-assigned is coupled to one Azure parent. User-assigned is independently created and reusable across Azure resources. For an external CI workflow, workload identity federation adds explicit trust from the user-assigned identity to the external OIDC token. In all three cases, target authorization remains a separate required step, already closed by the stem. Exam clue. Classify workload identity from lifecycle ownership, permitted sharing, and token origin. Those three signals distinguish coupling, reuse, and external federation without relying on credential storage. Question 4 of 45. Select 2 answers. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing and an existing access package in a catalog that allows external users. Fabricam is a new approved partner with its own Microsoft Entra tenant, but none of its users are in Contoso's directory. Fabricam users must be able to request the package through My Access without Contoso pre-inviting each user. Users from every other organization must remain ineligible. B2B collaboration restrictions already allow Fabricam. Which 2 actions should the administrator take? Option A. In identity governance, create a configured connected organization that represents Fabricam's Microsoft Entra directory as the approved external identity source. Option B. Add an access package assignment policy for users not in the directory. Select specific connected organizations and choose Fabricam. Option C. Bulk invite every Fabricam user as a B2B guest and directly assign the access package instead of creating an external request policy. Option D. Add a policy for all users. all connected organizations plus any new external users, so that a proposed connected organization is created for each new requester. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. In identity governance, create a configured connected organization that represents Fabricam's Microsoft Entra directory as the approved external identity source. And B. Add an access package assignment policy for users not in the directory. Select specific connected organizations and choose Fabricam. A connected organization represents Fabricam's external identity source, but eligibility for this particular package is established by its assignment policy. Selecting users not in the directory and specific connected organizations, then choosing Fabricam creates the closed self-service path. Approved requesters receive guest objects during entitlement delivery, so individual pre-invitation is unnecessary. Exam clue. Separate representation of an external requester population from the entitlement policy that makes that population eligible. Either object alone can exist without creating the intended request path. Question 5 of 45. Select two answers. Contoso uses a single-tenant application service principle to provision synchronized employees and partner B2B users. Microsoft Entra ID protection reports leaked credentials for the service principal. Sign-in and audit evidence confirms that the current client secret was used for unauthorized Microsoft Graph calls. This is not an approved deployment. Contoso has workload identities premium. The responder has security administrator and cloud application administrator permissions. No conditional access policy for workload identities is configured. Contoso must immediately stop this workload from signing in, retain the application object, and prepare it for a safe restart with no existing credential remaining valid. Which two actions should the responder take? Option A. Select Confirm Compromised and leave the service principal enabled while keeping its current credentials. Option B. Select Disable Service Principal for the risky workload identity. Option C. Add a new governed X509 credential, then remove every existing credential from the application and service principal objects before re-enabling the workload. Option D. Dismiss the service principal risk so that the existing application credentials can continue to be used. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. Select Disable Service Principal for the risky workload identity, and C. Add a new governed X509 credential, then remove every existing credential from the application and service principal objects before re-enabling the workload. The confirmed leaked credential and unauthorized graph calls establish a compromised workload, not merely a suspicious sign-in. Disable Service Principal is the documented direct action that blocks further service principal sign-ins, which is necessary because the STIM excludes automatic conditional access containment. Microsoft then directs administrators to inventory credentials, add a new credential, preferably X509, and remove compromised credentials. When the account is believed at risk, removing all existing credentials is recommended. Disabling alone does not make a later restart safe, and changing a risk disposition alone does not enforce either outcome. Exam clue. Separate workload incident response into planes. Report disposition says what investigators concluded. Disabling the service principal stops sign-ins, and replacing application credentials removes the attacker's reusable proof. A complete answer must match the outcomes named in the STIM. Question 6 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso's contoso.com domain is federated with ADFS. The company will migrate to Password Hash Synchronization, PHS, but first, 80 synchronized users must test cloud authentication while every non-pilot user continues to authenticate through ADFS. PHS is enabled in Microsoft Entra Connect, and a complete password hash synchronization cycle has succeeded. The pilot users use modern authentication clients and are direct members of a cloud security group that has no nested or dynamic membership and no contact objects. Conditional access and tenant branding for the pilot are ready. A hybrid identity administrator must preserve ADFS as the fallback and postpone domain conversion until testing succeeds. What should the administrator configure? Option A. Install pass-through authentication agents and enable staged rollout for PTA for the pilot group. Option B. Enable only the seamless single sign-on staged rollout feature for the pilot group and leave PHS staged rollout disabled. Option C. Convert Contoso.com from federated to managed, then assign the pilot group to PHS. Option D. Enable staged rollout for password hash sync, add the pilot group, and keep Contoso.com federated during the test. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Enable staged rollout for password hash sync, add the pilot group, and keep Contoso.com federated during the test. Staged rollout is Microsoft's temporary mechanism for testing managed authentication with selected synchronized users while the domain remains federated for everyone else. The PHS pre-work and supported group requirements are already satisfied. Adding the pilot group to the PHS staged rollout feature transitions those users to managed authentication after the documented interactive sign-in transition without converting Contoso.com. Domain conversion remains a separate action after testing. Exam clue. Treat migration as separate changes to selected user authentication routing and to the domain's federation state. Validate the new route before replacing the old trust boundary. Question 7 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso uses PHS with Seamless SSO for synchronized users in 3 Windows Server AD forests. The forests have no trusts, and Seamless SSO is enabled and working in each forest. Browser intranet zone policy and proxy allow listing are correct. The Azure EAD SSO Kerberos decryption keys were last rolled over 45 days ago. The operator has hybrid identity administrator credentials and domain administrator credentials for every forest. None of the domain accounts is in protected users. From the active Microsoft Entra Connect server, global catalog connectivity to the other forests is available on TCP 3268 and 3269. There are no Connect servers in staging mode. Which maintenance action should the operator perform? Option A. Run Update Azure AD SSO Forest twice consecutively in every forest to verify that the new key replicated. Option B. Enumerate the enabled forests, then run Update Azure AD SSO Forest once for each forest with that forest's domain administrator credentials. Option C. Rotate the ADFS token signing certificate once and allow Microsoft Entra Connect to distribute it to all 3 forests. Option D. Run Update Azure AD SSO Forest only for the forest that hosts Microsoft Entra Connect because the forests have no trusts. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Enumerate the enabled forests, then run Update Azure AD SSO Forest once for each forest with that forest domain administrator credentials. Microsoft recommends rolling the Seamless SSO Azure AD SSO Kerberos decryption key at least every 30 days. The command updates the key for one specific forest and the corresponding value in Microsoft Entra ID. So the operator must enumerate the enabled forests and run Update Azure AD SSO Forest once for each. Forest trust is not required. The stem also closes the credentials, protected users, global catalog connectivity, browser, proxy, authentication method, and staging server boundaries documented for this operation. Exam clue. Reason at the directory forest boundary. Each enabled forest owns its own seamless authentication trust material, regardless of server redundancy or interforest trust. Question 8 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P2. During an acquired forest migration test, a synchronized user signs in through an approved corporate VPN, and Microsoft Entra ID protection raises an atypical travel risky sign-in detection. A security administrator reviews the risky sign-in details. The device, application, user agent, MFA result, and user confirmation all match the authorized test. An investigation finds no malicious IP, token theft, password spray, unfamiliar application, or other indication of compromise. The VPN will be added to named locations separately. The administrator must classify this sign-in as a false positive so that similar sign-ins are not considered risky in the future. Which action should the administrator take on this risky sign-in event? Option A. Select Confirm Sign-in Compromised. Option B. Select Dismiss Sign-in Risk. Option C. Select Confirm Sign-in Safe. Option D. Dismiss the user's account-level risk. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Select Confirm Sign-in Safe. Confirm Sign-in Safe records that the selected risky sign-in is a false positive. Microsoft documents that similar sign-ins should then not be considered risky in the future. The evidence also matches Microsoft's investigation guidance for a sanctioned VPN and expected location, application, IP, and user agent characteristics with no other compromise indicators. Dismiss sign-in risk instead represents a benign true positive and intentionally keeps similar sign-ins subject to future risk evaluation. Exam clue. Classify the event object, evaluate the evidence, and distinguish an incorrect detection from a benign real event or a malicious real event. Each conclusion has different future and remediation consequences. Question 9 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has an existing non-mail-enabled security group synchronized from ADDS by Microsoft Entra Connect Sync 2.5.76.0. A modernized application references the group's current Microsoft Entra Object ID. The group is no longer needed in ADDS, and an existing B2B guest must be added directly in Microsoft Entra ID. Contoso has Microsoft Entra Free. A privileged role administrator has granted the administration app Microsoft Graph application consent for group on-premises sync behavior read-write all and group member read-write all. A hybrid administrator will use that app for the change. Only this group may change authority. All other synchronized groups must remain managed from ADDS. What should the hybrid administrator do first? Option A. Use the administration app to set Is Cloud Managed to True for the existing group's on-premises sync behavior, and then add the B2B guest to the same group. Option B. Add the B2B guest to the synchronized group in Microsoft Entra ID without changing the group source of authority. Option C. Create a new cloud-only security group. Copy the current members, add the guest, and delete the synchronized group. Option D. Disable Microsoft Entra Connect Sync for the tenant, wait for every synchronized group to become cloud managed, and then add the guest. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Use the administration app to set Is Cloud Managed to True for the existing group's on-premises sync behavior, and then add the B2B guest to the same group. Group source of authority conversion is an object-level operation. Setting Is Cloud Managed to True on the existing group's on-premises sync behavior converts that synchronized group to cloud management. Microsoft Entra Connect Sync then stops synchronizing that object, and its membership can be edited directly in the cloud. The supplied license, supported sync version, graph permission and consent, and hybrid administrator role close the prerequisites. Because ADDS no longer needs the group, optional provisioning back to ADDS is unnecessary. Exam clue. Preserving an object's identity and changing which control plane may write it are separate concerns. Prefer an in-place authority transition over disablement, premature edits, or recreation. Question 10 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam publishes a multi-tenant daemon application that authenticates with an existing X509 certificate. The application already has a service principal in Contoso and runs without a signed-in user. It must call Microsoft Graph in Contoso to read normal profile fields for specified Contoso users by using the /users/ID endpoint. It performs no writes and no broader directory queries. A Contoso administrator can grant tenant-wide consent before production use. No Microsoft Entra premium license is required. Which API permission and consent configuration should be used? Option A. Configure Microsoft Graph delegated permission user.read.all and have a Contoso administrator grant consent in Contoso. Option B. Configure Microsoft Graph application permission user.read.all and have a Contoso administrator grant consent in Contoso. Option C. Configure Microsoft Graph application permission directory.read.all and have a Contoso administrator grant consent in Contoso. Option D. Configure Microsoft Graph application permission user.read.all and have only a Fabricam administrator grant consent in Fabricam. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Configure Microsoft Graph application permission user.read.all and have a Contoso administrator grant consent in contoso.com. An unattended daemon uses app-only access, so it needs a Microsoft Graph application permission rather than a delegated scope. For getUser, user.read.all is the documented least privileged application permission. Directory.read.all is higher privileged. Application permissions require administrator consent, and access to Contoso data is represented by the service principal and app role assignment in Contoso, so a Contoso administrator must grant that consent. The X509 certificate authenticates the client, but does not authorize graph data access. Exam clue. Solve API authorization in 3 steps. Choose delegated versus app only from user context. Choose the least privileged API operation permission, and grant consent in the tenant that owns the target resource. A client credential proves application identity. It does not replace permission or consent. Question 11 of 45. Match each diagnostic trace to one remediation. Each remediation is used once. Contoso is moving 3 on-premises application servers into Azure Management by onboarding them to Azure Arc-enabled servers. Each server is connected to the intended Azure tenant and subscription. The local process has the documented Windows or Linux group membership needed to complete the Arc token challenge, and each target supports Microsoft Entra authentication. Match each diagnostic trace to the remediation the hybrid identity engineer should apply. Requirements. Requirement 1. Server A's connected machine agent is healthy. A trace shows that the token request includes an optional client _ID copied from configuration for an Azure VM resource. Processing stops on the host before any destination call. Requirement 2. Server C's trace contains a token response whose resource value matches the API. The service audit resolves the caller's object ID and then denies the attempted read because policy evaluation finds no applicable allow. Requirement 3. Server B's connected machine agent is healthy. The script's first HTTP request goes to 169.254.169.254. Unlike the known good trace, processing ends before the documented follow-up attestation request can be made. Target bank. Choice A. Remove the external client selector and request as the connected machine resource's platform-created identity. Choice B. Invoke the host-provided loopback metadata URL. Send the metadata marker and complete the returned local file challenge. Choice C. At the applicable resource scope, authorize the represented server principal for the attempted operation. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to A. Remove the external client selector and request as the connected machine resources platform-created identity. Requirement 2 maps to C. At the applicable resource scope, authorize the represented server principal for the attempted operation. Requirement 3 maps to B. Invoke the host-provided loopback metadata URL. Send the metadata marker and complete the returned local file challenge. The traces must be interpreted by boundary rather than matched by repeated labels. Arc-enabled servers obtain tokens as the connected machine's system-assigned identity, so a selector copied from another Azure resource is invalid for server A. Server B's link local VM request bypasses the Arc host loopback endpoint and protected file challenge flow. Server C has already authenticated with a correctly resourced token. Its denied operation requires authorization for the resolved server principal at the target scope. Exam clue: locate the first broken boundary in the request path and fix only that boundary. Evidence that a later boundary was reached rules out earlier stage remediations. Question 12 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P1, and the administrator is a Conditional Access administrator. The Fabricam and Litware tenant IDs are known. An access review for a supplier app pilot records the following identity evidence. Every Fabricam B2B collaboration guest belongs to the invitation-based supplier relationship, and new suppliers are invited each week from the Fabricam home tenant. Litware consultants are B2B collaboration guests from the Litware home tenant and remain in a separate application pilot. Fabricam project members use B2B Direct Connect for Teams shared channels and remain under an existing policy. The assigned Fabricam supplier launch group is a migration day snapshot. No owner or process maintains its membership. The policy owner defines the new assignment boundary as the Fabricam invitation-based supplier relationship and expects newly invited suppliers to enter that boundary without periodic group maintenance. The existing Litware collaboration and Fabricam Direct Connect assignments are not being consolidated. 2 emergency accounts are already excluded, and the new policy will remain report only during validation. Which user's assignment should the administrator configure? Option A. Select guest or external users, choose B2B collaboration guest users, and scope the selection to the Fabricam and Litware tenant IDs. Option B. Select guest or external users, choose B2B collaboration guest users and B2B Direct Connect users, then scope the selection to Fabricam. Option C. Select users and groups and include the assigned Fabricam supplier launch group as the policy's included user population. Option D. Select guest or external users, choose B2B collaboration guest users, and scope the selection to the Fabricam tenant ID. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Select guest or external users. Choose B2B collaboration guest users and scope the selection to the Fabricam tenant ID. The Fabricam suppliers are identified by 3 facts that map to the user's assignment. They use B2B collaboration, their home tenant is Fabricam, and invitations continue. Selecting the B2B collaboration guest type with the Fabricam tenant ID follows that relationship, as matching guest objects are created, without adding Litware's collaboration relationship or Fabricam's Direct Connect relationship, and without depending on the unmaintained snapshot group. Exam clue: translate the collaboration method into an external user type, the home tenant into source tenant scope, and population change into whether the assignment stays complete without membership maintenance. Question 13 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P1 licensing and is expanding B2B collaboration. A conditional access administrator must use a Microsoft-provided template to require MFA for guest access to Contoso resources. 2. Monitored emergency access accounts must be excluded. Neither account belongs to the administrator creating the policy. The team must observe impact before enforcement. Which creation plan satisfies the requirements? Option A. Create require multi-factor authentication for guest access from the template gallery. Add both emergency accounts to the policy exclusions, and turn on the created policy as soon as creation completes. Option B. Create require multi-factor authentication for guest access from the template gallery. Leave the default exclusions unchanged, and keep the created policy report only while results are reviewed. Option C. Create require multi-factor authentication for guest access from the template gallery. Add both emergency accounts to the policy exclusions, and keep the created policy report only while results are reviewed. Option D. Create require multi-factor authentication for guest access from the template gallery. Add both emergency accounts to the policy exclusions, target only Microsoft admin portals, and keep the policy report only while results are reviewed. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Create require multi-factor authentication for guest access from the template gallery, add both emergency accounts to the policy exclusions, and keep the created policy report only while results are reviewed. The template gallery contains require multi-factor authentication for guest access. A user targeting template excludes only the creator by default, so the administrator must explicitly add the two separate emergency accounts after creation. Template policies default to report only, which supports the required observation period before the policy is turned on. Exam clue. For deployment plan questions, separate population, exception handling, resource scope, and rollout state. Verify that each stated requirement is satisfied independently. Question 14 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso is migrating employees to synchronized hybrid identities, while Fabricam users continue to access Contoso resources as B2B collaboration guests. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P1 licensing. An enabled policy named Workforce Hybrid requires a Microsoft Entra hybrid join device for all resources and is intended only for synchronized employees. Emergency accounts are excluded. A Fabricam guest is blocked. The Sign-in Events Conditional Access tab shows Workforce Hybrid as applied and the Hybrid Join grant as failed. The policy currently includes all users. A maintained Sync Employees group contains every intended synchronized employee and no guests. A conditional access administrator must correct the design without weakening the employee control. What should the administrator do? Option A. Replace the All Users inclusion with the Sync Employees group. Keep the Hybrid Join grant and validate employee and partner sign-ins after the scope change. Option B. Create a separate Fabricam guests policy requiring MFA. Leave Workforce Hybrid enabled and compare both policies' results in the blocked guests sign-in log. Option C. Add a device filter for Microsoft Entra Hybrid Join devices to Workforce Hybrid, retain its grant, and compare results for employee and partner sign-ins. Option D. Exclude Fabricam B2B collaboration guests from Workforce Hybrid, retain the Hybrid Join grant, and compare policy results for employee and partner sign-ins. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Replace the All Users inclusion with the Sync Employees group, keep the Hybrid Join grant, and validate employee and partner sign-ins after the scope change. All Users includes B2B guests, which explains why the Contoso resource tenant policy applied to the Fabricam guest. The failed Hybrid Join result is evidence that the intended employee control reached the wrong population. Replacing All Users with the maintained Sync Employees group repairs the assignment durably while preserving the required Hybrid Join grant. Exam clue. When a sign-in shows an unexpected policy as applied, inspect assignment scope before changing the failed grant. A correct control applied to the wrong population is an assignment defect. Question 15 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P2 and synchronizes workforce identities from Windows Server AD. Investigators confirm that a synchronized account was compromised. The incident team blocks access, revokes sessions, cleans the user's hybrid joined device, and separately verifies the user with MFA. Password hash synchronization is healthy. The verified user completes a secured ADDS password change. Microsoft Entra Connect Health reports a successful password hash cycle, and the user can authenticate to Microsoft Entra with the new password. The risky users report, nevertheless, remains at risk. An earlier controlled response produced the same sequence. The new ADDS password was accepted in Microsoft Entra, but user risk did not change. Contoso must keep ADDS as the password authority and make that secured change workflow the durable corrective path for both the current identity level risk and equivalent future incidents. A security operator can modify the tenant configuration. What should the operator do? Option A. Have a conditional access administrator create a user risk conditional access policy that requires risk remediation. Have the verified user complete the prompted cloud flow and retain the policy for future incidents. Option B. Have a conditional access administrator add the office egress addresses as a trusted named location. Require a new secured ADDS password change there, and then verify the risk state. Option C. Enable allow on-premises password change to reset user risk. Require the verified user to make a new secured ADDS password change and verify that user risk becomes remediated. Option D. Select Dismiss User Risk after confirming that incident containment and the synchronized password change are complete, and then monitor for future detections. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Enable allow on-premises password change to reset user risk. Require the verified user to make a new secured ADDS password change and verify that user risk becomes remediated. The successful password hash cycles and acceptance of each new ADDS password prove that credential transport works. The unchanged at-risk state shows that the separate identity protection transition did not occur. Microsoft documents hybrid on-premises password change remediation as an opt-in integration that depends on password hash synchronization. A security operator can enable it. A new secured ADDS password change after enablement supplies the non-retroactive remediation event and can move the user from at-risk to remediated while preserving ADDS as password authority. Dismissal is a safe activity disposition. Conditional access uses a cloud sign-in remediation path and a trusted location changes sign-in context rather than the user risk lifecycle. Exam clue. When one lifecycle event succeeds in its system of record, but an adjacent security state does not change, evaluate transport evidence and the state transition integration as separate boundaries. Question 16 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso synchronizes workforce users from its ADDS forest to a managed Microsoft Entra domain. After an outage review, the security team requires each password to be checked by Contoso ADDS at sign-in and authentication to remain available while one authentication host is offline. The production deployment must follow Microsoft's recommended design. The primary intraconnect server and several supported Contoso Forest Windows servers can reach the domain controllers and required Microsoft endpoints. A trusted resource forest also contains supported management servers. Which deployment should the administrator implement? Option A. Select pass-through authentication and change user sign-in, then install the two standalone authentication agents on supported management servers in the trusted resource forest. Option B. Select pass-through authentication and change user sign-in, then install standalone authentication agents on two other Contoso Forest servers to create 3 active production agents in total. Option C. Select Pass-Through Authentication in Change User Sign-In, use the Connect installed authentication agent, and reserve the other Contoso Forest servers for intra-connect staging mode. Option D. Select Password Hash Synchronization in Change User Sign-In, enable SSPR Password Write-Back for synchronized users, and rely on cloud authentication during an on-premises host outage. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Select Pass-Through Authentication in Change User Sign-In, then install standalone authentication agents on 2 other Contoso Forest servers to create 3 active production agents in total. Selecting Pass-Through Authentication in Change User Sign-In enables the tenant feature and installs the first authentication agent on the Entra Connect server. Installing standalone agents on 2 other supported servers in the Contoso user forest creates the recommended 3-agent production design. The agents validate synchronized users' passwords directly against Contoso AD-DS and initiate outbound communication to Microsoft Entra ID. Exam clue. Separate the decision into credential validation location, the component performing that validation, and the dependency that must remain available during a host outage. Question 17 of 45. Select one answer. Fabricam is the source tenant and Contoso is the target tenant for an enabled same cloud cross-tenant user synchronization configuration. Fabricam has Microsoft Entra IDP1. One user is assigned to the source configuration. The provisioning job is not quarantined. Its initial cycle has completed, and the user object is still absent from Contoso. No sign-in can occur because no target object exists. The administrator needs to see whether the user was skipped or failed, the source and target systems, each processing step, and any error reason. Which Microsoft Entra Admin Center evidence should the administrator review? Option A. The user sign-in logs in the Fabricam source tenant, filtered to cross-tenant access. Option B. The user's audit logs in the Contoso target tenant, filtered to the Microsoft.Azure Sizer Fabric actor. Option C. Microsoft Entra Connect Health for Sync for Fabricam's on-premises synchronization server. Option D. The provisioning logs for the cross-tenant synchronization configuration in the Fabricam source tenant. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. The provisioning logs for the cross-tenant synchronization configuration in the Fabricam source tenant. The cross-tenant synchronization workflow is configured and monitored from the source tenant. Its provisioning logs identify which users were provisioned successfully or unsuccessfully and expose the identity, action, source system, target system, status, processing steps, modified properties, and troubleshooting reason. Target audit logs record target-side user management changes, sign-in logs require authentication activity, and Connect Health monitors a different on-premises synchronization system. Because the initial cycle has completed, the missing object calls for per-object provisioning evidence rather than waiting for an unstarted cycle. Exam clue. Select Identity Telemetry by the event lifecycle. Sign-in logs explain authentication. Audit logs explain directory changes, and provisioning logs explain object movement, including matching, scope evaluation, create update action, status, and failure reason. Question 18 of 45. Select two answers. Contoso uses Microsoft 365 during a hybrid forest migration. It has a valid Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps license. Microsoft 365 is connected, and app governance has been enabled for more than 10 hours. A security administrator examines a user-authorized Microsoft Entra OAuth app. The investigation records show all of the following. Publisher verification is absent. Permission analysis categorizes the app as highly privileged. Consent records list 73 Contoso users. One account in those records is assigned Global Administrator. The administrator drafts one Microsoft 365 custom policy with publisher verified equals no, highly privileged equals yes, number of consenting users a graded 50, names of consenting users set to the identified administrator account, disable app as the policy action, and policy status set to audit mode. The final policy must continue matching the 4-fact risk pattern as consent records change, and must automatically make each future match unavailable during policy evaluation. Which 2 changes should the administrator make? Option A. In the draft policy, retain disable app as the action, and after validating matches in audit mode, change the policy status to active for future evaluations. Option B. In the draft policy, change number of consenting users a graded 50 to names of consenting users equals the 73 accounts currently shown in the consent records. Option C. In the draft policy, use roles of consenting users equals global administrator instead of names of consenting users, leaving the other 3 conditions unchanged. Option D. In the draft policy, add community use equals rare to the existing condition group to limit matches to apps with an uncommon authorization pattern across Contoso. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. In the draft policy, retain disable app as the action, and after validating matches in audit mode, change the policy status to active for future evaluations. And C. In the draft policy, use roles of consenting users equals global administrator instead of names of consenting users, leaving the other 3 conditions unchanged. For Microsoft 365 custom app policies, Microsoft documents publisher verified, highly privileged, number of consenting users, and roles of consenting users as available conditions, and all specified conditions must be met. The draft already encodes the publisher, privilege, and volume facts correctly, but a named current account is not a durable representation of the global administrator role requirement. A changes that field to roles of consenting users while preserving the other conditions. Disable app is already the correct response, but audit mode evaluates without executing configured actions. D retains disable app and moves the tested policy to active so future matches execute the response. B would replace the required count threshold with a snapshot of current identities. And C adds community use, which is unavailable for Microsoft 365 custom app policies. Therefore, only A and D correct the draft without removing or adding a required predicate. Exam clue. Treat each selected change as part of one final configuration. Verify that the combined result satisfies every requirement without introducing a conflicting constraint. Question 19 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing. An active access review covers Fabricam guest membership in the Project Harbor Microsoft 365 group. The review is configured to apply results automatically when the review period ends, and to require reviewers to provide a reason. A Fabricam sponsor is the designated reviewer and can sign in to My Access. The sponsor does not hold an administrator role. The sponsor has confirmed that guest Alex's contract ended and must submit a deny response with the reason contract ended. Alex is not expected to be removed until the review results are applied. Order the actions the sponsor should perform. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Select Deny and enter Contract Ended in the required reason box. Item B. In My Access, open Access Reviews and select the Project Harbor review. Item C. Select the row for Alex in the list of users in scope. Item D. Select Submit to record the response. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1. In My Access, open Access Reviews and select the Project Harbor review. Step 2. Select the row for Alex in the list of users in scope. Step 3. Select Deny and enter Contract Ended in the required reason box. Step 4. Select Submit to record the response. Microsoft's reviewer workflow in My Access is to open the assigned access review, select one or more users, select Approve or Deny, supply a reason when required, and select Submit. Those state dependencies establish one total order. The sponsor needs no administrator role, merely to act as the designated reviewer. Deny records the review decision, but does not remove Alex immediately. Configured result application occurs at the review boundary. Exam clue. A reviewer's recorded response and the later application of review results are distinct governance events. Recording a decision does not itself change the user's access. Question 20 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso and Fabricam have separate Microsoft Entra tenants in the same commercial cloud during a merger. Contoso is the source tenant and must provision selected internal users and the cloud-only, non-mail-enabled Harbor Security Group to Fabricam. Harbor Security contains direct user members and no nested groups. Each pilot user has Microsoft Entra ID P1 in Contoso. Neither tenant uses Microsoft Entra ID Governance or Microsoft Entra Suite for this deployment. The implementation must provision both the users and the group object, scope provisioning to the selected pilot population, and let those users access Fabricam resources without accepting invitations. Security administrators, a hybrid identity administrator, and a cloud application administrator are available for their documented tasks. The connection test succeeds, and Fabricam has no other feature that requires premium licensing. Which implementation plan meets the requirements? Option A. In Contoso, add Microsoft Entra ID Governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing. Enable outbound automatic redemption to Fabricam. Select sync-only assigned users and groups. Assign the pilot users and Harbor Security, and set Provision Microsoft Entra ID Groups to Enabled equals Yes. In Fabricam, allow inbound user and group synchronization, and enable inbound automatic redemption from Contoso. Then start provisioning. Option B. In Contoso, add Microsoft Entra ID Governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing. Configure outbound B2B collaboration to Fabricam. Select sync-only assigned users and groups. Assign the pilot users and Harbor Security, and set Provision Microsoft Entra ID Groups to Enabled equals Yes. In Fabricam, allow inbound user and group synchronization, and enable inbound automatic redemption from Contoso. Then start provisioning. Option C. In Contoso, enable outbound automatic redemption to Fabricam. Select sync-only assigned users and groups. Assign the pilot users and Harbor Security, and set Provision Microsoft Entra ID Groups to Enabled equals Yes. In Fabricam, add Microsoft Entra ID Governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing. Allow inbound user and group synchronization, and enable inbound automatic redemption from Contoso. Then start provisioning. Option D. In Contoso, add Microsoft Entra ID Governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing. Enable outbound automatic redemption to Fabricam. Select sync-only assigned users and groups. Assign the pilot users and Harbor Security, and set Provision Microsoft Entra ID users to Enabled equals Yes. In Fabricam, allow inbound user and group synchronization, and enable inbound automatic redemption from Contoso. Then start provisioning. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. In Contoso, add Microsoft Entra ID governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing. Enable outbound automatic redemption to Fabricam. Select sync-only assigned users and groups. Assign the pilot users and harbor security. And set provision Microsoft Entra ID groups to enabled equals yes. In Fabricam, allow inbound user and group synchronization. And enable inbound automatic redemption from Contoso. Then start provisioning Microsoft documents that same cloud user synchronization requires Microsoft Entra ID P1 in the source, while same cloud group synchronization requires Microsoft Entra ID governance or Microsoft Entra Suite licensing in the source. No cross-tenant synchronization license is required in the target. Fabricam must allow inbound user and group synchronization. Automatic redemption is required for cross-tenant synchronization and must be enabled in Contoso's outbound direction and Fabricam's inbound direction. Group synchronization requires sync-only assigned users and groups, and assigning harbor security places the group and only its direct user members in scope. Separately, provision Microsoft Entra ID groups must be set to enabled equals yes, because its default is no. Starting provisioning activates the completed configuration. Exam clue. When an integration spans administrative domains, map each requirement to the side that owns the control and distinguish access policy from object provisioning before validating the end-to-end result. Question 21 of 45. Arrange all 6 access review deployment state descriptions in dependency order. Northwind is planning governed access reviews across security groups, enterprise applications, privileged roles, and access packages. Its governance register contains 5 independently enforced observations, shown in no workflow order. A. Operational activity is permitted only while a board-issued change record is active. B. The decision set covering scope and review behavior cannot be signed unless ownership evidence spans creation authority, adjudication, assistance, and compliance documentation. C. Process and message changes are admissible for expanded deployment only when supported by delivery, reviewer response, removal, and audit observations from the run. D. The board may activate the change record only when enablement material and limited scope protections have been accepted as one submission. And E. That combined submission is valid only when derived from the signed decision set. Arrange the state descriptions in dependency order. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Change state. Board acceptance is recorded and permission for the limited scope run is active. Item B. Design state. Authorized choices cover resource scope, population, reviewers, cadence, notifications, timing, non-response, and result handling. Item C. Observation state. Notification delivery, reviewer responses, removed access records, and audit events are captured. Item D. Readiness state. One accepted submission combines role training and support messaging with a small non-critical scope, non-automatic results, restoration records, email checks, and audit monitoring. Item E. Adaptation state. Process and communications are revised from the run observations for expanded deployment. Item F. Accountability state. Approval covers named IT, security, business owner, and governance duties for review creation, decisions, support, and control evidence. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1, Accountability state. Approval covers named IT, security, business owner, and governance duties for review creation, decisions, support, and control evidence. Step 2, Design state. Authorized choices cover resource scope, population, reviewers, cadence, notifications, timing, non-response, and result handling. Step 3, Readiness state. One accepted submission combines role training and support messaging with a small non-critical scope, non-automatic results, restoration records, email checks, and audit monitoring. Step 4, Change state. Board acceptance is recorded and permission for the limited scope run is active. Step 5. Observation state. Notification delivery, reviewer responses, removed access records, and audit events are captured. Step 6. Adaptation state. Process and communications are revised from the run observations for expanded deployment. Microsoft's guidance supports stakeholder responsibilities, pre-implementation review decisions, proactive communications and training, and a controlled pilot with non-automatic results, valid email, restoration records, and audit monitoring. It also says pilot experience can adjust processes and communications. Northwind's 5 governance constraints are deliberately presented out of workflow order. Resolving their producer-consumer relationships yields the one accepted total order without asserting a universal Microsoft lifecycle. Exam clue. Resolve which described state satisfies the prerequisite embedded in each governance observation. Do not use observation placement as a workflow queue. Question 22 of 45. Select one answer. An application developer creates a client secret for a test confidential client, records the secret's ID, and leaves the page without copying the secret value. The credential is unexpired, but the application has never received the value. The developer must provide a usable credential without changing API permissions or redirect configuration. What should the developer do? Option A. Add a web redirect URI to the app registration. Option B. Create a new client secret, copy its value immediately, update the test client, and remove the unused credential. Option C. Grant admin consent for the application's API permissions. Option D. Open the existing credential and reveal its original secret value. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Create a new client secret, copy its value immediately, update the test client, and remove the unused credential. Microsoft documents that a client secret value is displayed only once when created. Because the original value was not captured, the developer must create a replacement secret and copy the new value immediately. Redirect URIs and consent are unrelated authentication and authorization planes. Exam clue. Distinguish the credential record from the one-time secret value. An existing ID does not let you retrieve the lost value. Question 23 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P2 and is migrating users from an acquired ADDS forest. An enabled legacy Microsoft Entra ID protection sign-in risk policy covers the synchronized migration group, requires MFA for medium and high sign-in risk, and excludes 2 emergency accounts. Every in-scope user is registered for Microsoft Entra MFA. A conditional access administrator must replace the legacy policy with conditional access, add sign-in frequency every time, validate impact before enforcement, keep user risk handling in a separate policy, and avoid any gap in sign-in risk protection. Which migration plan should the administrator use? Option A. Create one report-only conditional access policy that combines medium-high sign-in risk and high user risk. Validate it, turn it on, and then disable both legacy risk policies. Option B. Create a conditional access policy for high user risk with require risk remediation. Turn it on immediately, and then disable the legacy sign-in risk policy. Option C. Disable the legacy sign-in risk policy first, then create the equivalent conditional access policy in report-only mode and leave it there until the migration finishes. Option D. Create an equivalent conditional access policy for medium and high sign-in risk with MFA authentication strength and sign-in frequency every time in report-only mode. Validate results, turn it on, and then disable the legacy sign-in risk policy. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Create an equivalent conditional access policy for medium and high sign-in risk with MFA authentication strength and sign-in frequency. Every time in report-only mode, validate results, turn it on, and then disable the legacy sign-in risk policy. Current Microsoft guidance places risk policies in conditional access and keeps sign-in risk separate from user risk. The equivalent sign risk policy targets medium and high risk, requires the built-in MFA authentication strength, and uses sign-in frequency every time. It begins in report-only for impact validation. Because report-only does not enforce, the legacy policy remains enabled until the validated conditional access policy is moved to on. Only then is the legacy policy disabled, preserving continuous protection. Exam clue. During control plane migration, distinguish observation from enforcement. Validate the replacement in report only, activate it, and retire the predecessor only after the new control is enforcing. Question 24 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing. A Tailspin user was approved through an access package policy open to any new external user, so entitlement management automatically created a Tailspin connected organization in the proposed state. Contoso has now approved Tailspin as a partner. Its Microsoft Entra directory identity source and authentication type are correct. A separate access package policy, which must not be edited, is scoped to all configured connected organizations. An identity governance administrator must make future Tailspin users eligible under that separate policy without pre-inviting them. What should the administrator do? Option A. Keep Tailspin in the proposed state and pre-invite each future Tailspin user as a B2B guest before the user requests the package. Option B. Keep Tailspin in the proposed state and add the approved requester as an external sponsor. Option C. Edit the Tailspin connected organization and change its state from proposed to configured. Option D. Keep Tailspin in the proposed state and replace its Microsoft Entra directory identity source with an email one-time passcode domain. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Edit the Tailspin connected organization and change its state from proposed to configured. Automatically created connected organizations remain proposed until an administrator approves the relationship. Microsoft documents that proposed organizations are not included by policies targeting all configured connected organizations, whereas configured organizations are. Promoting Tailspin to configured preserves the verified identity source and brings its future users into the fixed policy's requester population. Sponsors, guest pre-invitation, and authentication source changes act on different boundaries. Exam clue. Connected organization state controls broad policy eligibility. Proposed records an unapproved discovered relationship. Configured makes the approved relationship available to all configured scopes. Question 25 of 45. Select two answers. Contoso acquired Fabricam, whose ADDS forest and application network remain isolated from the Contoso forest. A legacy Fabricam web application has worked through Microsoft Entra application proxy with Microsoft Entra pre-authentication. Its URLs, user assignments, and back-end single sign-on settings are unchanged. The enterprise application is assigned to the Fabricam legacy connector group. After a firewall change, users receive an application proxy service unavailable page. Connector F01 is the only connector in Fabricam Legacy and appears inactive. Network traces confirm that its outbound traffic to the documented Microsoft service endpoints is blocked. Connector F02 is healthy, can resolve and reach the same backend, and has already been validated to complete the application's configured backend single sign-on, but is still idle in the default connector group. Contoso must restore access and retain two healthy connectors in the dedicated Fabricam legacy group. Which two actions should the administrator take? Option A. Restore F01's required outbound connectivity to the Microsoft service endpoints and confirm that the connector becomes active. Option B. Reassign the enterprise application to the default connector group and leave F01 inactive in Fabricam Legacy. Option C. Create a new app registration for the legacy application and grant it Microsoft Graph application permissions. Option D. Move F02 from the default connector group to Fabricam Legacy. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are D. Move F02 from the default connector group to Fabricam Legacy, and A. Restore F01's required outbound connectivity to the Microsoft service endpoints and confirm that the connector becomes active. An application proxy application is served only by connectors in its assigned connector group. F01 previously served the application and is inactive because the firewall blocks its required outbound Microsoft service traffic. So restoring that path repairs the observed failure. F02 is already healthy, can reach the backend, and has been validated to complete the application's configured backend SSO. While it remains in the idle default group, however, it cannot contribute to Fabricam Legacy. Moving it into the assigned group therefore gives that group two working connectors, which Microsoft documents as the High Availability Unit. Reassigning the app supplies only a one-connector partial bypass and abandons the required group, while app registration permissions operate on a different control plane. Exam clue. Troubleshoot application proxy in 4 distinct layers: Cloud Connector Health, Connector to Backend Network Reachability, Readiness for the application's configured backend SSO, and membership in the exact group assigned to the application. A connector contributes availability only after all 4 are satisfied. Question 26 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing. An existing partner migration access package in the project's catalog grants a security group role to synchronized employees and approved Fabricam guests. Its request, approval, expiration, and external user lifecycle policies are correct, and it has active assignments. Contoso must add the visitors role for a SharePoint Online project site to the same package, so current and future assignees receive both resources through one governed assignment. An Access Package Manager opens Add Resource Roles, but the site is not listed because it is not a resource in the project's catalog. The catalog owner is also the SharePoint site administrator of the project site. What should Contoso do? Option A. Have the catalog owner add the site to the project's catalog, and then have the Access Package Manager add the site's visitors role to the existing package. Option B. Create a second catalog containing the site and a second access package that every user must request separately. Option C. Add the SharePoint site to the Fabricam connected organization and wait for it to appear in the existing access package. Option D. Have the Access Package Manager grant visitors permission directly in SharePoint to every current assignee, and leave the package unchanged. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Have the catalog owner add the site to the project's catalog, and then have the Access Package Manager add the site's visitors role to the existing package. An access package can include only resource roles from resources in its catalog. Microsoft documents that an Access Package Manager is restricted to resources already present there and should ask a catalog owner to add a missing resource. For a non-global administrator to add a SharePoint Online site, the identity must be both a catalog owner for the catalog and either a SharePoint administrator or SharePoint site administrator of the site. Here, the project's catalog owner is also the site's SharePoint site administrator, so that actor can add the site to projects. The package manager can then add its visitors role to the existing package, preserving one request, assignment, expiration, and removal lifecycle for current and future assignees. Exam clue. When a resource is missing from an access package picker, trace containment before changing policy. Resource enters catalog first. Resource role enters package second. And policies govern assignment only after the bundle exists. Question 27 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso synchronizes workforce users from one ADDS forest by using a healthy custom Microsoft Entra Connect installation. Pass-through authentication is the selected sign-in method, and 3 healthy authentication agents provide normal production availability. Password hash synchronization is currently disabled. Contoso must keep PTA as the primary sign-in method during normal operations, but pre-stage cloud password validation for a total outage of the agents or on-premises directory services. The synchronized user scope is already correct, and administrators accept that activating the contingency can require an explicit change. Which configuration should a hybrid identity administrator implement? Option A. Enable password hash synchronization and rely on Microsoft Entra ID to switch automatically to the synchronized hashes whenever all PTA agents become unavailable. Option B. Change the selected sign-in method to password hash synchronization immediately and disable all PTA agents after the first hash cycle. Option C. Leave password hash synchronization disabled and deploy a 4th PTA authentication agent in the same on-premises forest. Option D. Enable password hash synchronization on the optional features page. Allow the initial password synchronization for all in-scope users to complete while PTA remains selected. And document a manual switch to PHS for an outage. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. Enable password hash synchronization on the optional features page. Allow the initial password synchronization for all in-scope users to complete while PTA remains selected, and document a manual switch to PHS for an outage. Microsoft Entra Connect can synchronize password hashes while PTA remains the selected sign-in method. Enabling PHS initiates synchronization for all in-scope users and keeps later password changes current, so cloud validation is prepared without changing normal routing. Microsoft explicitly states that PTA does not automatically fail over to PHS. During a total on-premises outage, an administrator must manually change the sign-in method. Immediate cutover violates the primary path requirement, while another PTA agent does not remove the on-premises validation dependency. Exam clue. Separate credential readiness from authentication routing. Synchronizing hashes prepares the cloud verifier, but the selected sign-in method determines which verifier is active. Redundant online agents and a pre-staged offline contingency solve different failures. Question 28 of 45. Select 2 answers. Contoso is migrating workloads from an acquired ADDS forest into Azure. The synchronized group migration ops must administer resources in subscription subprod by using the contributor role. Members must have no contributor permissions until they activate the role. Every activation must require Microsoft Entra multi-factor authentication, approval by a member of CloudOps approvers, and must expire after at most 2 hours. A resource administrator is configuring privileged identity management for Azure resources. Which 2 configurations are required? Option A. In PIM for Azure resources at the tenant root management group, configure the contributor role to require multi-factor authentication, approval by CloudOps approvers, and a 2-hour activation maximum. Option B. In PIM for Azure resources at the subprod scope, assign Migration Ops, the contributor role, with assignment type eligible. Option C. In PIM for Azure resources at the subprod scope, assign Migration Ops the contributor role with assignment type active. Option D. In the subprod contributor role settings, set activation maximum duration to 2 hours. Require multi-factor authentication on activation. Require approval, and select CloudOps approvers as approvers. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are B. In PIM for Azure resources at the subprod scope, assign Migration Ops the contributor role with assignment type eligible. And D. In the subprod contributor role settings, set activation maximum duration to 2 hours. Require multi-factor authentication on activation, require approval, and select CloudOps approvers as approvers. PIM for Azure resources separates assignment state from role activation policy. The Migration Ops group must receive an eligible contributor assignment at the subscription scope because eligible members must activate before using the role. An active assignment would provide standing access. The contributor role settings at subprod then enforce the 2-hour activation maximum, MFA, and approval by the designated approver group. The approval workflow permits selecting one or multiple users or groups as delegated approvers, so CloudOps approvers can supply the approver. Configuring the same controls at a parent management group would not affect subprod, because PIM role settings are defined per role and per resource and do not inherit to lower scopes. Exam clue. For PIM design, identify the role plane first, then solve 2 independent layers. Eligible versus active determines whether activation is required, while that role settings determine approval, authentication, and maximum activation duration. Question 29 of 45. Match each VM requirement to one action. Each action is used once. Contoso is moving 3 application tiers from an acquired forest to existing Azure VMs. Target resource authorization will be configured separately. The administrator uses the Azure portal. Match each VM requirement to the managed identity action that should be performed. Requirements. Requirement 1. VM legacy must stop using UAMI legacy, but the standalone identity must remain available for another VM. The administrator has virtual machine contributor on VM legacy. Requirement 2. VM batch must use the existing user-assigned identity UAMI migration. The administrator has virtual machine contributor on the VM and managed identity operator on UAMI migration. Requirement 3. VM API has no managed identity. It needs a system-assigned identity, and the administrator has virtual machine contributor on the VM. Target bank. Choice A. On the VM identity page under System Assigned, set status to On and save. Choice B. On the VM identity page under User Assigned, select the identity and remove it from the VM. Choice C. On the VM identity page under User Assigned, select Add and choose the existing User Assigned identity. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to B. On the VM identity page under User Assigned, select the identity and remove it from the VM. Requirement 2 maps to C. On the VM identity page under User Assigned, select Add and choose the existing User Assigned identity. Requirement 3 maps to A. On the VM identity page under System Assigned, set status to On and save. Microsoft documents different portal state changes for system and user-assigned identities on existing VMs. A system-assigned identity is enabled by setting system-assigned status to On. A pre-created user-assigned identity is attached through user-assigned add. The role evidence includes the additional managed identity operator permission required for assignment. An attached user-assigned identity is detached through user-assigned remove, preserving the separate identity for reuse. Target RBAC is intentionally outside this assignment question. Exam clue. Read managed identity tasks as desired state transitions on the host. Enable creates the VM coupled system identity. Add attaches an existing standalone identity, and remove detaches that identity. Then verify the RBAC prerequisite for the transition. Question 30 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID P1 and collaborates with Fabricam by using B2B guests. A conditional access administrator is creating a policy that includes Fabricam guests, targets all resources, formerly all cloud apps, and applies to their browser access from unmanaged personal devices. SharePoint Online is the workload of concern. When Microsoft Entra next evaluates an interactive session after 4 hours, the guest must authenticate again. Closing and reopening the browser must not preserve the Microsoft Entra browser session. Which session control configuration should the administrator use? Option A. Set persistent browser session to never persistent and leave sign-in frequency unconfigured. Option B. Set sign-in frequency to 4 hours and persistent browser session to never persistent. Option C. Set sign-in frequency to 4 hours and leave persistent browser session unconfigured. Option D. Set sign-in frequency to every time and persistent browser session to always persistent. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Set sign-in frequency to 4 hours and persistent browser session to never persistent. The premise explicitly targets all resources, formerly all cloud apps, satisfying the target resource prerequisite for persistent browser session. Sign-in frequency controls how long a user can access a resource before being asked to sign in again. So periodic reauthentication set to 4 hours satisfies the time-based requirement when Microsoft Entra next evaluates the interactive session. Persistent browser session controls whether the Microsoft Entra browser session survives closing and reopening the browser. Never persistent satisfies the second requirement. Either control alone leaves one clause unmet, and every time is a distinct reauthentication behavior rather than a 4-hour interval. Exam clue. Decompose session requirements by event. Elapsed use reauthentication maps to sign-in frequency, while behavior across browser closure maps to persistent browser session. Configure both when both events are specified. Question 31 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso is migrating synchronized users from an acquired AD/DS forest. The pilot users have the required Microsoft Entra Internet Access licenses, and healthy Global Secure Access clients are installed on their Windows devices. A Global Secure Access administrator must route the pilot group's general public web and third-party SaaS traffic through Microsoft's Security Service Edge proxy. Private RFC 1918 destinations must continue to bypass this path, and no on-premises application is being published. Validation must show an acquired public destination under the Internet channel. Which configuration should the administrator use? Option A. Configure private access quick access for the pilot group and add the public SaaS destinations as private application segments. Option B. Create Microsoft Entra Application Proxy enterprise applications for each public SaaS site and leave the Internet Access profile disabled. Option C. Enable the Internet Access traffic forwarding profile and assign it to the pilot group. Option D. Enable only the Microsoft traffic forwarding profile and assign it to the pilot group. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Enable the Internet Access traffic forwarding profile and assign it to the pilot group. The Internet Access profile is the global secure access profile for public internet and SaaS traffic. Its default acquire policy covers public TCP web traffic after bypass rules. It can be scoped to users and groups, and enabling it sends client traffic to Microsoft's SSE proxy. A healthy client and pilot group assignment close the acquisition path, while the public destination internet channel result distinguishes it from private access, Microsoft traffic-only routing, and application publishing. Exam clue. Classify global secure access traffic by destination before selecting a control. Microsoft workloads, named private resources, and the broader public internet use different forwarding profiles even when the same client supplies the tunnel. Question 32 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. Contoso has Microsoft Entra ID governance licensing. An identity governance administrator discarded an invalid access package draft that selected the wrong catalog. The correct hybrid migration catalog already contains the Migration Workspace Microsoft 365 group. A replacement package must grant the group's member role to members of the synchronized Sync Migration Users group after manager approval. Every requester has a valid manager attribute. Assignments must expire after 60 days and must not be extendable. Order the actions to create the replacement package in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Items in the displayed order. Item A. On requests, allow the Sync Migration Users group to request access and require the requester's manager to approve. Item B. On resource roles, add the Migration Workspace group and select its member role. Item C. On lifecycle, set assignments to expire after 60 days with extension disabled. Then validate the settings on Review plus Create and create the package. Item D. Start a new access package. On Basics, enter its name and select the Hybrid Migration Catalog. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1. Start a new access package. On Basics, enter its name and select the Hybrid Migration Catalog. Step 2. On Resource Roles, add the Migration Workspace group and select its member role. Step 3. On Requests, allow the Sync Migration Users group to request access and require the requester's manager to approve. Step 4. On Lifecycle, set assignments to expire after 60 days, with extension disabled. Then validate the settings on Review plus Create and create the package. Microsoft documents the access package creation workflow as Basics, Resource Roles, Requests, Lifecycle, then Review plus Create. For this replacement, catalog selection determines package placement. The member role defines delivered access. Requests defines the eligible synchronized population and manager approval. And Lifecycle defines the 60-day removal boundary before final validation. Every other permutation contradicts the documented wizard transitions. Exam clue. For entitlement management creation, separate where the package lives, what it grants, who may request and approve, and how long assignment lasts. Those decisions follow the wizard's dependency order. Question 33 of 45. Match each requirement to one setting. Each setting is used once. Contoso is the resource tenant for collaboration with Fabricam during a hybrid forest migration. Existing cross-tenant inbound and outbound access, MFA and device trust, redemption, and synchronization settings must not change. A global administrator will change only Contoso's external collaboration settings. Match each requirement to the setting that directly satisfies it. Requirements. Requirement 1. Redeemed guests must be unable to view any other user's profile, group, or group membership. Requirement 2. Only users assigned guest inviter or user administrator may send B2B guest invitations. Requirement 3. Invitations must be allowed for Fabricam.com and denied for every other external email domain. Target bank. Choice A. Set guest user access to the most restrictive own directory object option. Choice B. Set collaboration restrictions to allow invitations only to the specified Fabricam.com domain. Choice C. Set guest invite settings to only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to A. Set guest user access to the most restrictive own directory object option. Requirement 2 maps to C. Set guest invite settings to only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guest users. Requirement 3 maps to B. Set collaboration restrictions to allow invitations only to the specified fabricam.com domain. External collaboration settings separate 3 control planes. Guest user access governs what redeemed guests can browse in the directory. Guest invite settings govern who can issue invitations, including guest inviter and user administrator under the specific role setting. Collaboration restrictions allow or deny invitation domains. Therefore, the 3 requirements map directly to A, B, and C, respectively. Exam clue. For B to B governance, distinguish what a guest can see after redemption, who can initiate an invitation, and which domains are eligible before invitation. Cross-tenant access and synchronization answer different questions. Question 34 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso is migrating a claims application used by synchronized employees and partner guests. An existing Microsoft Entra app registration named ClaimsBridge holds the application's client credential. A privileged role administrator must give a migration engineer centrally auditable authority to update credentials and basic properties for ClaimsBridge only. The engineer must not manage any other app registration, grant API consent, manage groups, or administer Azure subscription resources. Which role assignment should the administrator create? Option A. Assign Application Administrator to the engineer at the ClaimsBridge app registration scope. Option B. Assign Cloud Application Administrator to the engineer at tenant scope. Option C. Assign Azure Contributor on the resource group that hosts the claims application. Option D. Create a custom Microsoft Entra role with app credential and property permissions, and assign it to the engineer at tenant scope. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A. Assign Application Administrator to the engineer at the ClaimsBridge app registration scope. Microsoft Entra supports assigning relevant built-in and custom roles at an individual app registration scope. The documented application scope example uses Application Administrator, and this scope permits credential and basic property maintenance for the selected app without extending the role across all registrations. Tenant-scoped application roles are broader, while Azure RBAC acts on Azure resources, rather than the Microsoft Entra app object. Exam clue. Least privilege in Microsoft Entra is the intersection of role capability and assignment scope. Choose a role that can perform the operation, then bind it to the smallest supported directory resource. Question 35 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso is migrating synchronized users from a federated sign-in configuration while continuing B2B collaboration with Fabricam. A synchronized Contoso user is unexpectedly blocked from a migration application. The help desk provides the exact failed interactive sign-in time and correlation ID. The administrator must identify which conditional access policy interrupted this sign-in and review the device and authentication details that were evaluated for that event. What should the administrator inspect first? Option A, the provisioning logs for the synchronized user object. Option B, the conditional access what-if tool using the user and migration application as current inputs. Option C, the exact sign-in event in Microsoft Entra sign-in logs, including its conditional access tab. Option D, the Microsoft Entra audit logs filtered for recent conditional access policy changes. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C, the exact sign-in event in Microsoft Entra sign-in logs, including its conditional access tab. Microsoft documents that unexpected conditional access sign-in outcomes should be investigated in Microsoft Entra sign-in logs. After locating the exact event, its Conditional Access tab shows the specific policy or policies that caused the interruption. The same event also exposes device, client, location, authentication, and troubleshooting details used in evaluation. What if is a simulation. Audit logs track configuration changes, and provisioning logs track object movement rather than this runtime sign-in decision. Exam clue. Match evidence to lifecycle. Use provisioning logs for object movement, audit logs for configuration changes, what if for simulation, and the exact sign-in event for the policies and context actually evaluated. Question 36 of 45. Select 2 answers. Litware synchronizes a group of migration administrators from ADDS to Microsoft Entra ID. A conditional access policy already targets that group and the migration console application, excludes monitored emergency accounts, and has passed report-only testing. Every targeted administrator has an allowed phishing-resistant method registered. Remember, MFA on trusted devices is disabled. Litware requires migration console access to accept only phishing-resistant authentication method combinations, and requires the most restrictive supported sign-in frequency cadence. Microsoft Entra's documented approximately 5-minute prompt tolerance window applies, and authentication strength and sign-in frequency can be satisfied at different times. Which 2 access controls should Litware configure in the policy? Option A. Under grant, require the built-in phishing-resistant MFA authentication strength. Option B. Under session, set sign-in frequency to every time. Option C. Under grant, select require multi-factor authentication without an authentication strength. Option D. Under session, set persistent browser session to never persistent. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Under grant, require the built-in phishing-resistant MFA authentication strength, and B. Under session, set sign-in frequency to every time. Authentication strength is the conditional access grant control that restricts which authentication method combinations can access a resource. Selecting the built-in phishing-resistant MFA strength closes the method quality requirement. Sign-in frequency is a separate session control, and every time is its most restrictive supported cadence. Microsoft documents approximately 5 minutes of prompt tolerance for every time, and notes that authentication strength and sign-in frequency requirements can be satisfied at different times. The item therefore selects the supported controls, rather than promising a new phishing-resistant prompt on every request. Generic MFA is weaker than phishing-resistant MFA, while Never Persistent Browser governs persistence across browser restarts rather than reauthentication cadence. Exam clue. Split compound conditional access requirements by control plane. Grant controls decide what proof is acceptable. Session controls decide how the resulting session is reused or reauthenticated. Question 37 of 45. Select 1 answer. Litware is migrating from federation to cloud authentication. It uses supported Microsoft Entra Connect Sync v2 servers, and each server has a current registered Microsoft Entra Connect Health agent. The agent services are running, outbound connectivity is healthy, and Connect Health data is current. Litware recently enabled custom attribute filtering to preserve the approved migration scope. Connect Health for Sync now displays a Limited Evaluation of Alerts banner. Litware must restore complete sync alert evaluation without changing the attribute filtering. What should the hybrid identity administrator configure? Option A. Remove custom attribute filtering so Microsoft Entra Connect returns to its default synchronization configuration. Option B. Reinstall the current Connect Health agent on every sync server and keep the existing upload setting. Option C. Deploy the Connect Health agent for ADFS to the federation servers and use its alerts for sync. Option D. In Connect Health for sync settings, allow the health agent to upload all error logs. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. In Connect Health for sync settings, allow the health agent to upload all error logs. Microsoft documents that a non-default Microsoft Entra Connect configuration, including custom attribute filtering, can prevent the Connect Health agent from uploading related error events and thereby limit alert evaluation. In Connect Health for sync settings, allowing the agent to upload all error logs restores complete evaluation while preserving the approved synchronization scope. The healthy agent and fresh data evidence rules out installation or connectivity repair, and ADFS Health monitors a different component. Exam clue. When monitoring is incomplete, but the agent is healthy and data is fresh, distinguish transport health from telemetry scope. Repair which events the agent may upload before reinstalling components or changing the synchronized population. Question 38 of 45. Select one answer. Contoso synchronizes ordinary users from the corp.contoso.com and research.contoso.com domains to one Microsoft Entra tenant. A previous passkey rollout created a Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object in corp.contoso.com only. At the HQ Active Directory site, Microsoft Entra Hybrid joined Windows 11 devices use a working Windows Hello for Business certificate trust deployment through an HQ scoped policy that enables use Windows Hello for Business and use certificate for on-premises authentication. The branch site has only a read-only domain controller. A separately scoped branch pilot contains synchronized users from both domains and must use Windows Hello for Business Cloud Kerberos Trust for SMB access, while HQ continues to use Certificate Trust. Contoso can add one read-write domain controller at branch. The team has an account that is domain admin in each domain and enterprise admin in the forest, a Microsoft Entra Hybrid Identity Administrator, and a server with the Azure AD Hybrid Authentication Management module and its required dependency. Which rollout plan should the team implement? Option A. Create the Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object in research.contoso.com from the module host by using the available AD and Microsoft Entra credentials. Retain the branch RODC as the only branch domain controller, and enable both use Cloud Trust for on-premises authentication and use Certificate for on-premises authentication for the branch pilot. Leave the HQ policy unchanged. Option B. Create the Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object in research.contoso.com by using the available AD and Microsoft Entra credentials from the module host. Add the read-write domain controller at branch and scope use Windows Hello for Business plus use Cloud Trust for on-premises authentication to the branch pilot with use Certificate for on-premises authentication not configured there. Leave the HQ policy unchanged. Option C. Create the Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object in research.contoso.com from the module host by using only the Hybrid Identity Administrator. Add the read-write domain controller at HQ and scope use Windows Hello for Business plus use Cloud Trust for on-premises authentication to the branch pilot with use Certificate for on-premises authentication not configured there. Leave the HQ policy unchanged. Option D. Rotate the existing corp.contoso.com Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object from the module host and use it for users from both domains. Add the read-write domain controller at branch and enable both use Cloud Trust for on-premises authentication and use certificate for on-premises authentication for the branch pilot. Leave the HQ policy unchanged. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is B. Create the Microsoft Entra Kerberos server object in research.contoso.com by using the available AD and Microsoft Entra credentials from the module host. Add the read-write domain controller at branch, and scope use Windows Hello for Business plus use Cloud Trust for on-premises authentication to the branch pilot with use certificate for on-premises authentication not configured there. Leave the HQ policy unchanged. Microsoft requires the Kerberos server object workflow in each domain and forest containing synchronized users, while an existing object does not need to be redeployed. The documented creation workflow uses domain admin plus enterprise admin credentials and a hybrid identity administrator from a host with the required module dependency. All are visible in the stem. Cloud Kerberos Trust also requires adequate read-write domain controllers in each authenticating AD site, so branch needs the permitted writable DC. Finally, the branch scope needs Windows Hello plus Cloud Trust policy and must not resolve the certificate policy because certificate trust takes precedence. Keeping the separate HQ certificate policy unchanged satisfies the coexistence requirement. Exam clue. Treat domain object placement, site local writable DC capacity, creation roles, and trust policy precedence as separate boundaries that must align in one scope. Question 39 of 45. Select one answer. Litware sends Microsoft Entra sign-in logs to a log analytics workspace. During the hybrid authentication migration, analysts see several sign-in logs rows for one interactive sign-in. An initial multi-factor authentication attempt fails, the retry succeeds, and all rows have the same correlation ID. A report must return one row per sign-in flow and show the final result type and conditional access status. Which KQL query should the analyst use? Option A, sign-in logs, summarize final status equals argmax, time generated, result type, conditional access status by correlation ID, user principal name. Option B, sign-in logs, project time generated, correlation ID, user principal name, result type, conditional access status. Option C, audit logs, summarize final status equals argmax, time generated, result type, conditional access status by correlation ID, initiated by. Option D, sign-in logs, summarize failure count equals count if, result type not equal 0 by user principal name, bin, times generated, 1D. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is A, sign-in logs, summarize final status equals argmax, time generated, result type, conditional access status by correlation ID, user principal name. Log Analytics stores each request in an interactive sign-in flow, including intermediate MFA failures and the eventual success, while the requests share a correlation ID. Summarizing by correlation ID and user principal name keeps flows separate, and argmax, time generated, result type, conditional access status returns the result fields from the latest request. The other queries either retain every row, aggregate unrelated flows, count intermediate failures, or query the wrong log table. Exam clue. Before counting sign-in failures in Log Analytics, identify the event grain. Request rows that share a correlation ID may be one user flow, so derive the latest status per correlation when the question asks for the effective outcome. Question 40 of 45. Match each observed issue to one setting change. Each setting change is used once. Northwind, Contoso tenant, is the resource organization for B2B collaboration with Fabricam. Both tenants use organization-specific cross-tenant access settings for the partner. Invitations and guest redemption succeed, and cross-tenant synchronization is not used. An engineer compares successful and failed sign-ins. Match each observed issue to the single setting change that directly remediates it without broadening unrelated access. Requirements. Requirement 1. A Fabricam pilot group member can access Contoso App A, but another Fabricam employee cannot. Contoso Inbound Access allows all Fabricam users to App A. Fabricam Outbound Access allows only the pilot group. Requirement 2. The same Fabricam pilot user can access Contoso App A, but is blocked from Contoso App B. Contoso Inbound B2B Collaboration allows the pilot group and selects only App A. Fabricam Outbound Access already allows both external applications. Requirement 3. A Fabricam pilot user reaches Contoso App A, but is prompted for MFA again. The sign-in shows MFA was completed in Fabricam, and Contoso's partner-specific inbound trust has MFA trust disabled. Device claims must remain untrusted. Target bank, choice A. In Contoso, add App B to the selected applications in Fabricam's organization-specific inbound B2B collaboration settings. Choice B. In Fabricam, add the employee to an allowed user or group in Contoso's organization-specific outbound B2B collaboration settings. Choice C. In Contoso, enable trust multi-factor authentication from Microsoft Entra tenants in Fabricam's organization-specific inbound trust settings. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to B. In Fabricam, add the employee to an allowed user or group in Contoso's organization-specific outbound B2B collaboration settings. Requirement 2 maps to A. In Contoso, add App B to the selected applications in Fabricam's organization-specific inbound B2B collaboration settings. Requirement 3 maps to C. In Contoso, enable trust multi-factor authentication from Microsoft Entra tenants in Fabricam's organization-specific inbound trust settings. Cross-tenant B2B access is constrained independently by home tenant outbound scope and resource tenant inbound scope. The App B comparison isolates Contoso's inbound selected application list because user targeting and Fabricam outbound application targeting already work. The non-pilot comparison isolates Fabricam's outbound selected user scope because Contoso allows all partner users. The redundant MFA prompt isolates Contoso's inbound trust setting, which controls whether resource tenant conditional access accepts a home tenant MFA claim. Neither guest reinvitation nor cross-tenant synchronization changes these allow and trust layers. Exam clue. Troubleshoot partner access as a matrix. Identify the user's home tenant, the resource tenant, whether the failing dimension is users or applications, and whether the symptom is access or claim trust. Then change only that direction and layer. Question 41 of 45. Select 2 answers. Northwind is moving a partner operations workload from a federated forest to a multi-tenant SaaS application. The enterprise application requests the Microsoft Graph Group Read All application permission. The admin consent workflow was already active when a synchronized migration user submitted a request. A designated reviewer who is a cloud application administrator can see the request in My Pending but cannot approve it. An available global administrator is not yet a designated reviewer. Northwind must preserve the request workflow as the approval record and must not change the app registration or replace the application permission. Which 2 actions should an identity engineer take to make the request approvable by the global administrator? Option A. Add the available global administrator to Who Can Review Admin Consent Requests and save the workflow settings. Option B. Assign Cloud Application Administrator to the available administrator and approve the existing request from the All tab. Option C. Make the global administrator an owner of the app registration so the existing request moves into My Pending. Option D. Have the current designated reviewer deny the existing request. After the global administrator is designated, have the user submit a new admin consent request for the application. Lock in your answer. The correct answers are A. Add the available global administrator to who can review admin consent requests and save the workflow settings. And D. Have the current designated reviewer deny the existing request. After the global administrator is designated, have the user submit a new admin consent request for the application. The requested Microsoft Graph application permission is an app role, and Microsoft documents that only a global administrator can approve an admin consent request containing Microsoft Graph application permissions. That administrator must also be designated as a workflow reviewer, because role assignment alone does not create a reviewer assignment, and reviewer assignment is not retroactive. The current designated reviewer must first deny the old request. Denial preserves the workflow history and does not prevent a future request. After the global administrator is added as a reviewer and the setting is saved, the user submits a new request. Because that request is created after designation, it can appear in the global administrator's My Pending tab and be approved through the required workflow record. Exam clue. When an old admin consent request is visible but not approvable, check both reviewer gates and the request lifecycle. The current reviewer can deny the old request, denial permits a future request, and the appropriately privileged reviewer must be designated before the new request is submitted. Question 42 of 45. Arrange all actions from first to last. During a partner-tenant coexistence project, Northwind manually invited 4 Fabricam guests before deploying entitlement management. Each guest later self-requested and received the same migration workspace access package, which is now the guest's only access package assignment. The assignments page shows each guest's identity lifecycle as ungoverned. At cutover, Northwind must block each guest immediately after the final assignment is removed and delete the guest object 7 days later. Order the actions an identity governance administrator should take. Items in the displayed order. Item A. Complete both lifecycle preparation operations as one action. Their internal order does not matter. In entitlement management control configurations, enable block external user and remove external user. Set the removal delay to 7 days, and save. And for each active self-requested assignment, select the guest and choose Mark Guest as Governed. Item B. Confirm that each guest is blocked from signing in. Item C. On the Access Packages Assignments page, select each guest and remove the guest's final access package assignment. Item D. Verify that each guest object has been removed from the tenant. Lock in your answer. The correct order is Step 1. Complete both lifecycle preparation operations as one action. Their internal order does not matter. In entitlement management control configurations, enable block external user and remove external user. Set the removal delay to 7 days and save. And for each active self-requested assignment, select the guest and choose Mark Guest as Governed. Step 2. On the Access Packages Assignments page, select each guest and remove the guest's final access package assignment. Step 3. Confirm that each guest is blocked from signing in. Step 4. Verify that each guest object has been removed from the tenant. The first action deliberately treats the 2 source-independent prerequisites as one compound lifecycle preparation step. The administrator may save the tenant controls and mark each eligible self-requesting guest as governed in either internal order, but both must be complete before the final assignment is removed. Removal is then the documented trigger for governed-only lifecycle handling. Blocking follows that trigger, while object deletion follows the configured 7-day delay. At the 4 learner visible action level, these temporal dependencies uniquely require CADB without inventing a precedence between the 2 prerequisite operations. Exam clue. For external user offboarding, establish the future lifecycle policy and the guest's governed state before triggering loss of the last access package assignment. Verification comes after the trigger and configured delay. Question 43 of 45. Match each workload to one identity. Use each identity once. Contoso is choosing identity types for 4 workloads. Required resource permissions will be assigned separately. Match each workload to the most appropriate identity. Requirements. Requirement 1. A vendor-hosted daemon outside Azure calls Microsoft Graph app only, without a signed-in user. The vendor can protect and rotate an X509 certificate. Requirement 2. An on-premises Windows service runs on several domain-joined servers. ADDs must rotate its password automatically, and every host must use the same account. Requirement 3. An Azure VM runs an unattended collector. Its principal must be created and removed with the VM, and operators must not manage credentials. Requirement 4. A desktop support tool calls Microsoft Graph only while an administrator is signed in. Its effective access must not exceed that administrator's permissions. Target bank. Choice A. Application Service Principal. Choice B. Group Managed Service Account, GMSA. Choice C. Signed-in user with delegated permissions. Choice D. System-assigned managed identity. Lock in your answer. The correct mapping is Requirement 1 maps to A. Application Service Principal. Requirement 2 maps to B. Group Managed Service Account, GMSA. Requirement 3 maps to D. System Assigned Managed Identity. Requirement 4 maps to C. Signed-in user with delegated permissions. The Azure VM needs a lifecycle-coupled, credential-free Azure identity, so it uses a system-assigned managed identity. The multi-host domain service needs AD/DS managed password rotation, so it uses a GMSA. The external daemon needs its own app-only principal and can use certificate authentication, so it uses an application service principal. The interactive support tool must act only within the signed-in administrator's authority, so it uses delegated permissions. Exam clue. First, identify where the workload runs. Then, determine whether the principal follows an Azure resource, belongs to ADDS, acts app only, or represents a signed-in user. Question 44 of 45. Select one answer. Northwind is planning one app registration for a partner migration portal. Employees from Northwind and from approved partner Microsoft Entra workforce tenants must sign in using organizational accounts that remain in their respective home tenants. Northwind will not invite or provision partner users as B2B guest accounts in Northwind's tenant. Northwind must not create a separate registration for each partner, and personal Microsoft accounts must be unable to sign in. API permissions, consent, user assignment, and any partner tenant allow listing will be planned separately. Which supported account type should Northwind select? Option A. Accounts in any organizational directory and personal Microsoft accounts. Option B. Accounts in this organizational directory only, single tenant. Option C. Accounts in any organizational directory, any Microsoft Entra directory, multi-tenant. Option D. Personal Microsoft accounts only. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is C. Accounts in any organizational directory, any Microsoft Entra directory, multi-tenant. Microsoft Documents. Multiple Entra ID tenants, represented by accounts in any organizational directory, as the supported account type for multi-tenant applications used by organizational accounts from any Microsoft Entra tenant. It supports the one registration partner model without adding personal Microsoft accounts. Single tenant is limited to users or guests represented in Northwind's tenant, which the premise now prohibits for partner users. The organizational plus personal choice is too broad, and personal only selects the wrong population. API permissions, consent, assignment, and partner allow listing remain separate from supported account type selection. Exam clue. Translate the audience requirement literally. One home tenant means single tenant. Multiple workforce directories means organizational multi-tenant. Add the personal account audience only when consumer identities are explicitly required. Question 45 of 45. Select one answer. An identity engineer can switch among Northwind's production tenant, a Northwind lab tenant, and a partner tenant. Northwind's production platform team will own and maintain a new application registration. Partner organizations will later use the application, but consent and supported account types will be configured after the registration is created. Because an application object cannot be moved to another tenant after creation, where should the engineer create the registration? Option A. Create only an enterprise application in each tenant, instead of a home app registration. Option B. In the partner tenant, because partner users will eventually sign in. Option C. In Northwind's lab tenant, then move the application object to production after validation. Option D. In Northwind's production tenant, after switching the admin center to that directory. Lock in your answer. The correct answer is D. In Northwind's production tenant, after switching the admin center to that directory, registration establishes the application's trust in the selected tenant, and Microsoft states that the application object cannot be moved between tenants after creation. The engineer must therefore switch to Northwind's production directory before selecting new registration. Partner audience and consent decisions are separate. Exam clue. Choose the tenant that owns the application object before reasoning about who may later sign in. You completed all 45 questions. Group any misses by objective, identify the requirement you overlooked, and answer again from the mechanism rather than from a memorized keyword. Thanks for practicing with WebLizard's CertLab. Review your week objectives, revisit the complete exam clues, and continue with the next SC-300 practice exam when you are ready.